up here. I won't take up much more of your time because I know there's a lot of questions in the audience. Let me just reinforce a couple of the things that people have said and tie some of this together. I think there's no question that all of us believe that the administration worked very hard on this summit. We know many of the staffers who were involved in this, and we know personally how many hours they put in and how difficult these things are. But I think we all share the belief that in the end, this was an underperforming summit. It had a minimalist agenda. One of the reasons that the off-mic comment and other issues grabbed attention is because the summit itself didn't demand attention. It did not produce any breakthroughs. It didn't reach for new goals. It, as other speakers have said, it basically sped up things that were underway anyway. And when you look at the declarations, when you look at the press releases of the achievements of the summit, they're all good things, but a lot of these are pretty small potatoes. Pretty small potatoes that are all gathered up here to make it look like a more formidable banquet. The national security strategy of the United States says that the number one threat to our nation today is the threat of nuclear terrorism. But the administration is not acting as if that is true. They are not devoting nearly the resources, both financial and personnel, to this task, and it shows up when you come to a summit like this. We can't let this pattern continue. I know people are already working on the Dutch summit in 2 years. They have to be told now that they've got to do better than this. Otherwise, these summits are in danger of becoming like the NATO summits, where everybody comes together, they have a great time, there's lots of speeches, and nothing really happens. Everything's brought down to the minimum acceptable consensus. We can do better. We have to avoid things like the problems we had by basing the summit in Seoul. I mean, one of the reasons plutonium didn't get a lot of attention, I'll be frank with you, is that South Korea wants to produce plutonium. South Korea wants to reprocess plutonium. This is their big thing. They have a lot of nuclear reactors, and they would like to take those reactors and start fueling them with what they call mixed oxide fuel. It's plutonium fuel, putting plutonium in the fuel rods to in part burn up the plutonium, but in part to reprocess the plutonium from their stored fuel. We see the potential dangers of this in the disaster of Fukushima a year ago. Reactor number 3 had a partial load of plutonium fuel. It raises very serious environmental concerns as that fuel, the particulates from that fuel, were spread over many square kilometers in Japan, adding a new and unnecessary poison to the already serious radioactive debris from that plant. So it's understandable that the administration was under some constraints about pushing plutonium, but it's also because the administration has, frankly, a very weak internal policy on plutonium. You heard Sharon, I believe, bring the quote up from the president's speech talking about new fuels of the future. These are not fuels of the future. Plutonium fuel is the failed fuel of the past. But the administration is committed to building a new plutonium fuel factory in the United States. In the United States. This is a multi-billion-dollar facility that's supposed to be part of the non-proliferation solution. In fact, it's paid for out of non-proliferation funds under the Department of Energy. It's supposed to take uranium, mix it with plutonium, and then sell it to power companies in the United States for fuel. One big problem. No power companies in the United States want to buy it. This fuel is dangerous, expensive, requires major modification of the reactors. So you've got this plant producing fuel to nowhere that's charging ahead based on contracts and political commitments that will actually make the problem worse by developing a plutonium economy, by starting to develop a market for plutonium that will encourage people to make more plutonium to mix it in this fuel. It's exactly the wrong path to be going on. There are things that the administration could be doing, and they should consider several of them. You've heard them today. I strongly support the idea of fissile zero. of not producing any more highly enriched uranium, any more plutonium anywhere. So when South Africa left the summit and went home and announced that it was starting a new production of highly enriched uranium to 96%, highly enriched uranium for its research purposes, the United States should have had a statement regretting that decision. But as far as I know, there was silence from the United States. You've got to make, if this is a priority, if you want to stop the proliferation of this material, if you want to stop nuclear terrorism, you have to make this a priority in your relations with other countries. You can't continue to be governed by state-to-state relations or trade relations and put this proliferation issue down at the bottom of your to-do list. There was a very constructive suggestion in the New York Times 2 days ago by former Assistant Secretary of State Bernie Aronson. He was suggesting how the administration could start an initiative with Brazil. The leader of Brazil will be visiting this country next week. And Brazil is very interested in expanding its uranium enrichment program. But Brazil could set a model for the world by abandoning this uranium enrichment process. It needs encouragement from the United States to do so. It needs to feel that it's part of a global effort to stop the spread of enrichment technologies. We are flooded with enriched uranium in the world. We have plenty of enriched uranium for fuel coming out of existing facilities. We don't need Brazil starting up a new facility, or South Korea, or Australia, or other countries, or Jordan, or other countries that have flirted with this idea. This should become part of the administration's plan. Stop not just the production of fissile material that could be used in weapons, but reduce the amount of fissile material, new fuel facilities for enriched material everywhere. Overall, as the President spoke in South Korea, you could see that this effort to prevent nuclear terrorism is an integral part of his plan for how to deal with nuclear threats. And the President of the United States has presented the most comprehensive, coherent program for dealing with nuclear threats of any president in U.S. history. He puts together 3 critical factors and moves on all of them together. Prevent nuclear terrorism, prevent new states, reduce the existing stockpiles of nuclear weapons. You have to do all 3 of these together. The problem the President has had is that while he's doing these, he's doing all of these too slowly. He's shown progress since he announced this program in Prague on April 5th, 2009, but it's all proceeding much more slowly than he himself wants. The President has to find the personnel in the administration who believe as strongly in this vision as he does and put them in charge of these missions. He's got to find the members of Congress from both parties, and they are there, who believe as strongly in this mission as he does and work more closely with them. Bring them to summits like Seoul. Bring them into the White House discussions. And he's got to work more closely with people like you. He has to work more closely with the press, both himself and his close associates, to explain what the mission is, to build up public support, to overcome the number one obstacle to all this that we face today, which is cynicism. What the President calls our deadly adversary, the belief that we can't do this. We can prevent new states. We can prevent nuclear terrorism. We can reduce the almost 20,000 nuclear weapons that exist in the world today. But we need public support. We need political support. The President has a vision. He needs more help accomplishing that vision. Thank you.